History is full of some of the most important cars in the history of motor racing. The Porsche 917, the Ford GT40, the Lotus 49. But one of the most important cars in the history of racing was not designed in a wind tunnel or in a very complex facility in Geneva. No. It was designed in a Californian garage made out of fiberglass. This is the story of the Meyers Manx. Before we can talk about the Meyers Manx, we gotta talk about the vehicle it's based on. The humble Volkswagen Beetle. Now, the Volkswagen Beetle, or Type 1 as it was called, was the brainchild of, our good friend Adolf Hitler. Yeah, about that. Anyway, this was designed to be a people's car. And that meant it was cheap, easy to run, and designed by Ferdinand Porsche. And you wonder where he gets the rear-engined, air-cooled engine from. The Beetle was an instant success after Nazi Germany went away, anyway. They sold over 15 million of them, and eventually that grew to over 20 million Volkswagen Beetles by the end of production in 1978, except in Mexico when they ended in production in 2003. But anyway, where does the Meyers Manx fit in all of this? Well, Bruce Meyers grew up in California during the peak surfer culture. Okay? And he was hanging out on the beach, and one day he saw a modified dune buggy, and it was a mid-engined V8 based on a pickup truck, and it was very heavy, very slow, and very cumbersome. And being the good boat-building engineer that he was, he thought he could improve upon that design. So, he took a Volkswagen Beetle, a used one, and took the body off, so it was just the frame and the engine. Then, he designed, with his fiberglass experience building boats, a custom fiberglass monocoque body with no doors, no windows, no roof, no trunk, no hood, nothing. And that meant it was some 500 pounds plus lighter than the Beetle. That's a lot of weight reduction. Now that meant it still had a Beetle engine of 60 horsepower and 80 foot-pounds of torque, but it was propelling a vehicle that weighed just 1,200 pounds. That's as light as a Lotus 11. And he had a name for it. It was called the Manx, named after the Manx cat breed, which is known for its ability to quickly turn while chasing things. That is cool. And you know what? He didn't even plan on making one. You see, it wasn't a production car. He was originally built it, for fun, and maybe sell a few to his friends here and there. And then people started seeing him messing around on the dunes and the beaches of California, and people went, "Hey, where'd you get that? I want one." So, he started selling them. Unfortunately, the fiberglass monocoque was incredibly expensive and difficult to make, which meant only 12 were actually produced with the fiberglass monocoque frame. So, in 1966, Meyers founded the B.F. Meyers & Co. company. And instead of making a monocoque, fancy body, he simplified it and made it one piece. Still made a fiberglass, just like a Corvette. But it was one piece. It wasn't as complex, and that meant it was cheaper. And that meant it was affordable. And people loved the little buggy. You just simply took your Volkswagen Beetle, and again, there's millions of them around, so you can pick one up for cheap, send it over to Meyers, he'll take the body off, put a new body on, and you got yourself a genuine Meyers Manx. And over 6,000 of these things sold in the first 5 years. And they were featured all over the covers of Hot Rod magazine, Car and Driver, dozens of others. They were becoming hugely popular. In fact, they were in major movies. Elvis used one. Same thing with the King of Cool, Steve McQueen. He used one in the Thomas Crown Affair. He freaking loved it. He loved it so much, he swapped in a Chevy Corvair V6 engine, making 230 horsepower. That is a ridiculous power-weight ratio. That's a better power-weight ratio than most sports cars today. And these movies had the Meyers Manx doing incredible stunts, driving up dunes, crazy fast, jumping, airtime, and it just made it look even better. And then there was motor racing. The prototype, made by Bruce, the very first one, model 001 if you will, was called Old Red, and the amateur racers of Bruce and his friend Ted decided to have a bit of a play around and entered the equivalent of the 60s anyway, of the Baja 1000, you know, for fun. Now this was originally dominated by Broncos and motorcycles. That was it. And these two amateurs show up in a dinky Volkswagen Beetle wannabe, with enough fuel on it to be considered by Meyers himself a rolling bomb, and they frickin' won! And then, not being content with just winning the Baja, they entered the La Paz run, which the record, held by a professional motorbicyclist. Those two amateurs beat that record run by over 4 hours. All of this attention led to the creation of a professional off-roading association to control all of these individual races and unify them, because people were so interested in beating the Manx's record. They had to try it themselves, so a governing body was created, called the National Off-Road Racing Association, which still stands to this day. Unfortunately, the 60s success cannot keep up, and as success climbed, so did copycat companies, and Meyers tried to copyright the Manx. But the court system decided it was not copyrightable, and threw his suit out. And that meant over 300 companies were producing 350,000 copycat buggies by 1970. And the Manx brand tried to, switch things up. They made roadsters, they made 2+2, they even made a German military off-road vehicle homage called the Kubelwagen. But it wasn't enough. And by 1971, the Bruce Meyers company had faltered and folded in 1971. And that was it. The Meyers Manx was done. Until 1999, that is. The 70s obsession with buggies had died out by the 90s, and Meyers saw an opportunity to get back in the game. And he created the Meyers Manx Incorporated, and has been selling new Manxes based off the new BO4 plant, ironically, since 1999 as original Meyers Manxes. And sure, it's low volume production, but what's wrong with low volume production? It's a continuation of a 1960s design screwed over by government interference and copycats. And he also is doing another thing where if you bought an original Manx, a genuine Manx, you can go to Meyers, send him some pictures and documentation, and he will certify it for you, and he will authenticate it to make sure that you have a genuine Manx. And if you want to know how important a genuine Meyers Manx is, The prototype Old Red became the second car ever added to the Library of Congress's National Register of Historic Vehicles in 2014. We have the humble Meyers Manx prototype, which stands not just as a American success story eventually, where you start out humbly in your garage and you've made a cult icon that people love. But it also stands as one of the most important and sadly forgotten about racing vehicles ever made, single-handedly creating an entire racing association just by how successful it was. The Meyers Manx is one of the most important cars in America.